Good evening to everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Monday, February 27th, 2023 meeting of the Falls Church City Council. I'd like to call our meeting to order and ask you all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, will you call roll, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Ms. Conley.
Here.
Mr. Duncan.
Here.
Ms. Hardy.
Here.
Ms. Leon.
Here.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott.
Here.
Mr. Snyder.
Here.
And Mayor Tarter.
Here.
And I think we have a motion for electronic participation for Ms. Shantz Hiscott.
I think we do. Let's hear it if there is one forthcoming.
Mayor, I'd like to make the motion.
Okay.
Ms. Hiscott, can you identify your location and reason for your participation for electronic means?
I'm in Arizona for personal travel.
Okay. I move that City Council approve electronic participation for Debbie Shantz Hiscott in tonight's meeting for personal reasons pursuant to the City Council's policy on participation in meetings through electronic means as adopted by Resolution 2023-01.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley.
Yes.
Mr. Duncan.
Yes.
Ms. Hardy.
Yes.
Ms. Leon.
Yes.
Mr. Snyder.
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Motion carries. Ms. Hiscott may participate remotely.
All right, congratulations. Let's move on now to the adoption of the meeting agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the meeting agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. So we do have a couple special proclamations this evening. First one declares March as Social Work Month, and Ms. Leon is going to do the honors. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her.
Okay. Whereas social workers enter the profession because they have a strong desire to help empower individuals, families, communities, and our nation and help them overcome issues that prevent them from reaching their full potential. And whereas social workers follow a code of ethics that calls on them to fight social injustice and respect the dignity and worth of all people. And whereas social workers positively touch the lives of millions of Americans each day and in a variety of places, including schools, hospitals, the military, child welfare agencies, community centers, and in federal, state, and local government. And whereas the 2023 Social Work Month theme, Social Work Breaks Barriers, embodies how social workers have continued to push for changes that have made our society a better place to live, including advocating for a livable wage, improved workplace safety, and social safety net programs that help ameliorate poverty, hunger, and homelessness. And whereas social workers are on the front lines of the nation's opioid addiction crisis, helping people get the treatment they need to prevail over substance use disorders. And whereas social workers have helped this nation live up to its values by successfully advocating for equal rights for all, including Black, Indigenous, people of color, those who are LGBTQA, religious groups, and others. And whereas the social work profession is one of the fastest growing careers in the United States, with more than 100,000 social workers every day, social workers today, and nearly 800,000 professionals expected to be employed as social workers by 2028. And whereas social workers possess the necessary expertise to assist our nation in some of its most demanding concerns, including their health and well-being, not only during the pandemic and aftermath, but at all times, ensuring equal rights, improved health care, and mental health care for all, and immigration reform.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim March 2023 as Social Work Month in the City of Falls Church and call upon all members of the community to join in celebration and support of the social work profession. Is anyone here, any social workers here that can receive this proclamation this evening? You're close enough. Come on down. So thank you both very much for your service to the community. You're welcome to speak if you so desire, or just come on up and receive the proclamation, whatever you might.
Just Dana Lewis, Dana Jones, sorry.
There you go. I was going to have to correct you on your name.
Of Human Services, and Leslyn Barrow, who is the city's Human Services specialist with the city.
All right, well, come on down. Let's go ahead and hand you this proclamation. Maybe get a photo. All right, next up is a proclamation declaring March 2023 as Women's History Month. And as I think most of you know, we've had a great success these past few years with the Women's History March, due in large measure, in large regards to our own Mary Beth Conley. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to read this proclamation.
Thanks, Mayor Charter. This is a proclamation declaring March 2023 as Women's History Month. Whereas women have made lasting contributions to the growth and strength of the United States, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and the City of Falls Church in countless recorded and unrecorded ways. And women led the way in securing suffrage and equal opportunity for all, and in creating a more fair and just society. And women play prominent roles in the local history of Falls Church, which has been home to noted abolitionists, educators, business owners, volunteers, and visionary leaders. And whereas there are many opportunities to learn about women's history in Falls Church, and Women's History Month is an important opportunity to recommit to learning about the strong women who built our community. And whereas the Falls Church Women's History Walk is in its 6th year and is continually expanding, featuring stories of more than 60 local women, including many that are permanently imprinted in city sidewalks on South Maple Avenue and Tinner Hill Road. And the Women's History Walk is presented by the Women's History Group and the Tinner Hill Heritage Foundation in conjunction with numerous community organizations. And her story stations, this is new this year, will be posted inside public buildings and businesses around the city that have joined in the celebration of these inspiring women during Women's History Month, with a full map of signs available on the Women's History Walk website. And the Falls Church Episcopal will provide an outdoor exhibit of her story stations at the historic Falls Church. And whereas people of all ages are encouraged to learn about the women who led Falls Church in the past and shaped the city's history, and about those who are currently leading the city into the future, and are asked to carry on the legacy of these women by making positive difference in the city of Falls Church and the world.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim March 2023 as Women's History Month in the City of Falls Church, and call on all residents to observe this month with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities, including participating in the Falls Church Women's History Month Walk. We have some folks in the audience who I think are going to be participating in it and who have shown leadership roles. Would you guys like to come forward and receive the proclamation, or at least have a photo with us?
Mayor Turner, can I say something?
Of course you
Real
can.
fast, and then we can invite all the women in the audience to come up and get in the picture. All of you. So this year, the Women's History Walk is not going to be a one-day walk. It's going to be all over the city all month long. And there are signs like this. And they will be in about 35 local businesses, at the schools, in City Hall, the community center, the library. And there's an opportunity for everyone to come and take a look at these signs. So when you see a sign, there's a QR code right up here, and that'll give you a map of where all the other signs are. And stop in those businesses. On the website, there's a checklist so you can see all the different signs that are out there. But there are 60 different women from all eras, a nice diverse mix of women, and we'd love for everyone in the city to have an opportunity to see it. And they will be up the entire month of March. So please come on out and see them. Bring your kids, bring your neighbors, bring your parents. So now can we get all the women to come up and get in a picture?
Sure. Come on down. All right. Madam Clerk, are there any oaths of office to administer?
No, sir.
All right, let's move on to the receipt of public comments. Would you like to begin with a summary of written comments received?
I would. Let's see. Yes, for our written comments, we received several regarding T-zones. Sarah Belden of 300 West Rosemary Lane said T-zone revisions as amended make sense and are reasonable and desirable, and that she believed reduced setbacks would not negatively impact walkability. Diane Trent of 420 Park Avenue said she opposed the Planning Commission's recommended changes to T-zones because they would allow more building, challenge minimal setbacks, and provide weaker environmental protections. She asked for a better compromise on any changes to those zones. City Council was also provided on letters, they were copied on letters to the Planning Commission in advance of the Planning Commission February 15th consideration of the proposed T-zone changes, and the following shared those letters. Bruce Byers, 405 Timber Lane, Michael and Ann Kelly, 2759 Summerfield Road, Peng Heinem of 206 North Lee Street, Chris and Bethany Scully, 2723 Welcome Drive, Diane and Mark Trent, 420 Park Avenue, Lisa Marty of Annandale, Kristen Miller of 2409 Lexington Road, Taylor Drame from Arlington, Robert Hoff from 300 Riley Street, John and Kathleen Flynn, 2732 Welcome Drive, Edward and Austin Middleton, 412 Sherrow Avenue, Jeff Drame of Arlington, Catherine Hurley, 6919 Jefferson Avenue, Sean and Tasha O'Donnell, 7226 Pinewood Street, Ashley and Jeremy Reflo, 6604 Quinton Street, Wynn Singleton of 508 East Columbia Street, Lauren Thomas, 310 Lawton Street, Ken Fears and Lila Pegg of 2905 Rose Place, Jessica and Andrew Reeves, 707 Berry Street, Clinton and Robin Gary, 7426 Fairwood Lane, Alicia and Tom Carmody, 802 Parker Avenue, and William Romanius, 413 Parker Avenue. In other letters, John Grodelski of 210 East Fairfax Street wrote with concerns about the slow rate of traffic on Broad Street. Chris Michelli of 138 Rolling Trace requested an ordinance prohibiting predatory towing. And Dave Rifkin of 126 Whittier Circle requested repairs to the sidewalk on Whittier Circle.
All right. Thank you
you.
very much. Let's move on to the receipt of public comment from folks in the room. So if you're here or on the internet, you're also welcome to speak. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers signed up at this time?
Yes, we do. First, I have Erin Flynn, and followed by Mary Chavez.
All right, welcome.
Hi, I'm Erin Flynn, 222 Little Falls Street. My comments tonight pertain to Council's upcoming work session on T-zones. I want to flag 4 requests that arose before the Planning Commission that I hope Council will renew when it meets next week. First, enlisting the city arborist and city stormwater staff. This was a request that the Urban Forestry Commission made in its December 1st written comments and that commissioners and the public have echoed. Input from the city arborist and stormwater staff should inform the discussion of lot coverage, setbacks, impervious surface maximums, and tree canopy and street tree requirements. 2, getting schematics and renderings of those parcels most likely to be redeveloped and at the parameters being discussed. Planning commissioners have sought renderings as to lots on Park Avenue in particular because the city's graphics haven't been helpful where they don't reflect existing buildings, homes, and the width of the street. Such renderings will help inform the building envelopes and setbacks necessary to encourage rather than discourage an active pedestrian streetscape with ample green space and street trees. Third, getting the estimated change in land value for each parcel with historic structures. This information can help answer whether it's realistic to think that under the city's historic preservation code, there will be bona fide purchasers at new fair market values who will seek to maintain the 4 historic structures on T-zoned lots despite increases to both building size and the scope of authorized uses, or if instead such changes will effectively doom these structures. And 4, updated post-pandemic regional housing projections. In each of its presentations, the city has relied on projected housing needs based on the 2019 COG report. But at the Commission's last meeting, there was a UVA study before the Commission that showed that Northern Virginia is losing population and that trend is likely to continue post-pandemic because of increased remote work options. The city is doing well on meeting its housing and projected housing needs through the larger developments, though affordable housing is still a problem. Updated projections are important for balancing ongoing development against community concerns regarding scale, increased traffic and parking on local streets, infrastructure needs, and the loss of tree canopy and green space. I'd submit those considerations highly favor quadplexes and urban townhomes over maximizing lot coverage for still larger development. Finally, as to community engagement, Council should afford an opportunity for actual public dialogue before it proceeds to any new first reading. People want to be involved and share their vision and ideas for any amended ordinance, whether through focus groups or other direct outreach. When people show up to give 3-minute remarks, they're doing so in the posture of reacting to something as opposed to being involved in its creation. I hope Council will take stock of the public's reaction to T-zones and to the recent East End plan and create avenues for meaningful engagement. I hope that's also true for the Great Streets Project, which is quickly approaching 60% design without further public outreach, despite broad public interest from businesses, neighbors, and the bike community at the 30% design phase over 6 months ago. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mary Chavez. There you go.
Okay, I'm Mary Chavez, 215 Lawton Street. T-zones are not on your agenda tonight, but I wanted to give you some feedback on the Planning Commission's recommended changes prior to next week's work session. In response to comments from more than 600 city residents, the Planning Commission has sought to address several of the public's concerns about uniform zoning changes for very diverse transition lots throughout the city. The extreme coverage and minimal setback requirements of the council proposal, a broad expansion of by right commercial uses with no city review, and the lack of attention to tree canopy, stormwater, and green space for proposed new development. To focus on just a few of these, the Commission would encourage residential development on Park with commercial use only on a conditional council review basis. Residential use on lots on North Washington Street, north of Great Falls, in contrast, would not be allowed. Triplex and quad residential homes could be built by right within current parameters for single-family residential homes to encourage missing middle housing. All by right construction would be limited to 3 stories or 40 feet, but might increase to 4 stories or 50 feet with conditional council approval. Council approval would be needed to increase by right lot coverage from 60% to 70%, or to reduce front and rear setbacks from 20 to 15 and 10 feet, respectively. I welcome the effort to reduce coverage and height and to increase setbacks from the initial council proposal. However, I feel strongly that a maximum 3-story height and 50% coverage, with allowance for townhouses and quads, and a minimum 20-foot setback for front and rear yards, is essential to maintain the transition character of these lots next to residential and condo neighborhoods with no conditional modifications. The North Washington Small Area Plan specifically calls for 3-story maximum heights with larger setbacks and landscaping between existing and proposed structures in the southwest section of the area. These requirements should be sustained. I am concerned about the proposal of no residential use on North Washington Street and seek city legal review of its impact on Sunrise and the Miller House for the disabled. Specific stormwater review to further reduce flows in heavy storms, preservation of existing trees, adequate street tree canopy, and assurance of green buffers are also critical. I urge you to give these issues serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk?
Yes, we did have somebody sign up online, but I don't believe they're here.
Is there anyone online who has signed up to speak? If not, if you do rejoin us later, we can see if we can accommodate you if you've lost connection and the like. But otherwise, if there's no one else who is signed up or would like to speak, we're going to move on the agenda. So let's move on to the CACT annual report. Dave, Aaron, would you guys like to come on up and let's hear all the good work you all have been doing?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, and city staff. I'm joined by Aaron Campshire, who is the awesome new chair of CACT. I've been before you for various transportation, stormwater, and miscellaneous reasons for over the last 6 years, but a big thank you to all of you for how seriously that you've taken transportation safety, and I'm leaving CACT in very good hands with Aaron and the rest of the CACT and the great staff that we have. And there's been a lot of momentum in recent years, and so thank you all for helping build that and maintain that going forward. So with respect to the annual report, I'm just going to give a few highlights, share a couple observations I've had over the last 6 years on CACT, and then turn it over to Aaron for 2023 priorities and beyond. It was another very busy year in the transportation realm in Falls Church. Lots of good things happening. One thing with the Great Falls Street and Dorchester Road, I know you all had a lot of citizens before you not too long ago. We're happy that the new rectangular rapid flashing beacon, the RRFB, it has been installed. That's going to be a big safety boon to users there with the bus stop and with the park. And it was also designed in such a way as to allow for a future bike lane there. So thank you all for getting that installed so quickly. On East Columbia Street, probably the most jaw-dropping thing that I've seen in my 6 years on CACT was an August traffic study that showed people speeding 72 miles an hour on East Columbia. Yes, 72 miles an hour, and there were others in 50 and 60 and 70. It was jaw-dropping, and so that was between Washington and Cherry, also, if you can believe that. So,
Phil, I didn't think your car would go that fast.
Yeah, so it's we've never seen anything like that, but clearly East Columbia is another one of the streets that we have that is too wide and too much of a attractive, racetrack for certain folks to go. So Aaron will talk more about the speed trailers that we have. But yeah, we would appreciate any sort of continued enforcement, speed trailers, anything else. We also advise the residents that if they have cars that they can park at sections along the street to just narrow it, just anything that will help reduce the risk of speeding there. I've had to yell at people on East Columbia as well as at West Columbia and Little Falls in the last week. So with Greenway Downs, that's another gigantic project. Jeff Sykes on staff and planning and many people on city staff are doing a great job moving that along. We've got Jess Hagenbarth with CACT is keeping an eye on that as well and engaging with the community. And then we're also working on neighborhood traffic calming, NTC program revisions. This is something that is good to do every few years. So we appreciate the council has had that in the council work plan. Carrie Odonino has done a great job of kind of taking a lot of the ideas from CACT and lessons learned from stakeholders on staff and on CACT and ones that we've kind of kicked forward from recent NTC projects. So hopefully you'll be getting that set of recommendations in the next couple of months. So then on page 2 of the annual report, last year was another busy year with regard to bike infrastructure. In March 2022, we held another bike-related meeting with the ESC. We had a lot of great input from some of our neighboring jurisdictions who are a little more advanced and have more kind of specialists who involved with bike infrastructure. A lot of great lessons learned in there. I won't rehash all of them, but one that came up in the CACT letter that was also co-signed by the Planning Commission and the ESC is that bike lanes are an extremely low-cost way to reduce the width of some of these very large streets that are places that people like to speed and make them less attractive to pedestrians and people on bikes. And so also with that in mind, Park Avenue is another place where we need to have, it needs to be safe for all users. So I'll be very interested to see what happens at the 60% design. My wife and daughter were almost doored on Park Avenue when we were going to the library a couple months ago. So I don't like riding on Park, and I ride in downtown DC. So we'll be eager to see how those designs turn out. Also, in terms of development reviews, something that we picked up in the CACT meeting, actually, it was thanks to Erin, when she was a prospective CACT member who hung around for one of our legendary long meetings, pointed out that we could ask for a level of service reports from developers when they're for pedestrians and people on bikes. That's something that other jurisdictions do. We don't just need to settle for vehicular level of service. So that's something I'd encourage everybody to keep an eye on going forward. And then just a few observations. So thank you again to council and city staff for all the money that you've put toward transportation safety in recent years, the uptick in sidewalk construction. It's great to see that happening. We have a lot of other places, as with the city population up 40% in the last 20 years. We need to find more ways to encourage multi-mobility, so people walking, people biking, people using scooters, and so on. And with respect to NTC, I'm excited that we're putting forth some recommendations for some much needed improvements to that program. But NTC is a good tool for certain cases, but I would encourage council and staff to also keep an eye out for complete streets and Vision Zero and things that other jurisdictions are doing, where it's looking for a more equitable use of the space and not just kind of settling for, how do we use the existing built environment and kind of put it back as close as it was to before. Then I would also say that, we're also, you see it in the news that pedestrians and people on bikes are being killed all around us and injured. And so we've been fortunate and a bit lucky in recent years. So there's the need is there. And so, many people that I talk to have had close calls, know people who have had close calls. So the standards for transportation are also evolving very rapidly. And so if there's more training, more staff, I know the city had done a staffing survey and then also a salary survey as well. So I would encourage kind of a close look at transportation-related staffing and salaries to make sure that we're kind of adequately meeting the challenges that we face from a transportation perspective. Also, thank you to staff and to council for approving the funding for the Rapid Safety Improvements Team. There's a lot of excitement on CACT, me especially, about what that team and DPW will be able to do. I think there's a lot of chance for some early wins there, and so eager to see that team get stood up and also score some early wins and hopefully work closely with CACT. And just a couple more things. So one, also encourage, this came up in a recent council meeting, there are a lot of different avenues for ideas for transportation safety projects to come in. And so I'd encourage if there's a way that we can kind of consolidate that list, because I know CACT has created lists, staff has created lists. If there's a way that we can kind of consolidate some of that, and that'll kind of lead to, I think, a more efficient, productive discussions going forward in terms of how to prioritize budgets and staffing and so on. I think that's all I have. So thank you again. It's been a real joy to work with you all. I'm not going anywhere. I've told Aaron and others if I can ever help with anything, please let me know. But it's been a lot of fun. It's exciting to see how much has gotten done and continues to get done. So I appreciate all of you, and I'll turn it over to Aaron.
All right. Before you turn it over to Aaron, I want to just personally thank you on behalf of my colleagues for the great service you've done in this community, both through CACT, but also Stormwater, and just your overall involvement in making this a better community, a better city. So our thanks and our hats off to you.
Thank you.
Aaron?
Hi, I'm Erin Campshire. It's great to be here. It's great to meet all of you. I'm going to keep this really quick, kind of concise, because really the bottom line is for 2023, we're going to try to keep doing everything that Dave has sort of set us on the path to do, right? So we've provided a lot of comments for NTC. Actually, something that I was thinking about is when Erin was making her comments earlier, the NTC is a very reactionary program, right? It's been around for over a decade, and the way projects get put in there is because neighbors complain about it. And I love that, and I think it's great that citizens have a voice. But like Dave said, we're gonna try to look at what a complete street vision is. What does the ideal street in Falls Church City look like? So we want to do that. I think there's some opportunities to be very collaborative across departments. I think collaborative across projects. Columbia Street, great example that Dave gave, right? I can tell you, because I was in a wheelchair for 4 months, you cannot take a wheelchair down the sidewalk on Columbia, right? You just go up the road where cars go 70 miles an hour. That's the only choice you have if that's where you want to be. And right now, they're doing some stormwater runoff. And I kind of joked the other day, they're putting the street back exactly the way it was. And I think hopefully we can try to help to find those opportunities to be fiscally responsible. And can you just put it back with like a speed bump? That'd be great. Maybe that's the right answer, maybe it's not. But I think that there are at least opportunities to be, more collaborative moving forwards with Public Works, with street trees, with stormwater runoff, when there are projects to look at that and say, okay, instead of putting it back exactly the way we found it, let's try to move the needle to more ideal, right? So that's something that we're looking to do. I think, like Dave said, the quick wins with the rapid improvements team, I think is going to be good. Finding the opportunities for speed trailers and sort of the temporary things that we can do to collect better data to sort of better prioritize, right, our different projects. So I think those are the things that we're looking forward to. Like I said, I want to keep this concise. You have the document. You can read it probably faster than I can read it to you. But I think we're just kind of moving towards finding the ideal, because I think what we have is not ideal. The one anecdote that I'll share with you is that my husband and I used to bike up Columbia Pike. I worked at the Pentagon. I lived in Falls Church, not Falls Church City, but like the Falls Church area, Fairfax County, all the way up Columbia Pike. Never had issues with cars. Yeah, they go pretty fast. We bike pretty fast. We moved to Falls Church City. Twice in the first year, my husband got hit by a car on Columbia Street. Twice. Both times he was going straight. Both times the car was turning left. And that's really sad to me. So I'm really hoping that I have a personal motivation here, right? Once we figure out what that ideal street looks like, how do we make sure that we continue to be accountable to that, right? So that's kind of what we're looking for. I want to give Dave a chance to do any closing remarks.
Sure. Thank you. Just wanted to say a couple quick thank yous. One other quick recommendation. I got to talking to someone, it was a contractor that the city hired to do stormwater mapping. So thank you again for that. It's very important, and I appreciate that. The guy was very nice, up from Richmond, and we got to talking about, he does surveying for stormwater and transportation issues, and so we had a lot to talk about. So he was saying that he was doing some surveying along the W&OD and got stuck. His truck was at one end, like over by Great Falls, and he was over by Little Falls. And so he's like, oh, I saw one of those Lime bikes there. So I downloaded the app and I put $10 on it. And then I went to to start it, and it died right at the city line. And so I would just encourage I know, I think it was September 2019, there was the Shared Mobility Devices pilot program had come up, and that was one of the first things that kind of got thrown overboard with the understandable reprioritization of the start of the pandemic. But I would just encourage you all to, if there's a way that we can kind of dust that off, and just so we can make it that we're not a dead zone for dockless scooters and bikes, because every one of those that is used is not an internal combustion engine that's going to help reach our climate goals. And I've had that experience too, where I've been coming from East Falls Church back when you could get more of those dockless bikes and scooters, not the bike share, but the dockless ones, and it would start chirping at me as soon as I got into the city. And so I'd have to walk it back down to the Arlington line. And so Arlington, Fairfax, DC, they all have them, and we're just kind of sort of dead zone in the middle. So hopefully there's a way that we can, so I've got some numbers on, and the permits for which companies are doing that. But I just want to say some quick thank yous. So big thanks to Zoe LaRive, the CACT liaison, and Jeff Sykes, also our CACT liaison. Anna Mazidi was Public Works Senior Engineer that we had. So big thank you to Councilman Snyder, our CACT liaison. Big thank you to all of you. I've had long chats with all of you about transportation matters. So Wyatt, Cindy, Celeste, Veronica, Sophie, thanks all of you. So there's a lot of, I've been back in my journalistic days, I covered a lot of city governments, and so this is the best one I've ever seen. So I'm very fortunate to have that. So thank you all for being so responsive and accessible, and I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you once again, both of you. But let's go ahead and open it up to comments or questions from the dais here. Mr. Snyder, do you have something you wanted to say?
Sure. Just to return the thanks to you and all the members of CACT. You put in hundreds of hours every year and really help us set our priorities. I had an opportunity a couple weeks ago to speak to the head of the National Safety Council, and she noted that Falls Church was one of the few cities that had not had a traffic fatality in the past couple years. And she asked why, and I said, well, first of all, citizens such as you who insist that this remain a priority, a city council that's responsive, a city staff that's responsive, an interesting comment she made, and the blue lights are really effective at controlling traffic. They can't be everywhere, but the fact that our police are out there actually enforcing laws made a huge difference. And finally, frustration with Richmond and the constraints they put on us in terms of electronic and speed enforcement, red light cameras, and all the rest of it. So anyway, but I had the opportunity to lead with exactly your activism, so thank you very much. And I hope when we're done with comments, we can invite our two chairs up for a photo with City Council. So thank you. Thanks again.
Other comments or questions? Vice Mayor Hardy?
Thank you. I will also extend the thanks to you, Dave, and Aaron for taking it on. I think you guys are one of our most active boards and commissions, and clearly transportation safety is a priority for this council, so we appreciate all the guidance from you. And you, Dave, personally, I think have exemplified what it means to serve the community. I think it's very easy to kind of lob comments, give complaints about what's going on, but you personally have rolled up your sleeves and put in so much effort and time into the city between stormwater and transportation, and so we're very grateful for that. Thank you. A suggestion for going forward. So I did read your report with much enthusiasm. Love everything that you guys have suggested. In particular, I actually really like that dashboard that you guys have created around metrics, because the reason I focus on that is not only just for my project management days, but as we talk about pushing all these goals in the city without measuring progress, otherwise all this just becomes busy activity. So hold us accountable to that, because I think that's a really great way to make sure that all the priorities that we're saying are important actually deliver on actually moving the needle on various results. So I love that one in particular. Another suggestion is, I know there's no shortage of work, which is why you guys have so many bullet points, but I think it would be helpful to hone in on maybe like 3 to 5, like here are the top things we're really going to focus on, because I know that there's plenty to do, but I think it'd be helpful for you to kind of have that elevator speech of like, hey, here are the most important things that you need council to fund, here's what you need the community rally around, here's what needs to show up in your work plan. And so I'd just encourage you to get to that like a really crisp list of, it's bike lanes on these streets, it's, a NTC 2.0 project, it's, whatever it might be. Just get to that kind of bulleted list so that we can be very clear and actually deliver on those goals with your collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So I tell you, I do want to actually follow up on something you mentioned about level of service for pedestrians and bikers. I think that's a great idea, and I think we should be moving to that like ASAP. So I'll just plant that seed, Mr. Shields, if there's things that we can do to sort of start laying the groundwork for that for future developments and traffic consultants that come through the door. I think it would be extremely helpful and match and align with our priorities as a city. So anyway, did you have something, Ms. Conley?
Just quickly, I'll add my thank you to both of you for the work you put in and for this well-done report, because there really is a lot going on in the city, and you have touched almost all of it. So thank you very much for that. And I will second Ms. Hardy and say that the dashboard is great. I think that that should be out there and should be updated and is a real simple way for people to look and see where we rate compared to other communities, as well as how we can get better. So I do appreciate that. And also looking at the neighborhood traffic calming, because you're right, it is reactionary, it's important, and sometimes it's the people that are the loudest that get the best response, but there are other neighborhoods that might need more help, but they just haven't organized enough. So it would be really good to be able to work on that program as well. It has made some big differences in the city, and I think going forward, there are a lot more areas that need that help as well. So thank you.
All right. Well, again, our thanks. We look forward to working further with you and Dave. We want to rope you back in some fashion or the other. We're sure we'll be able to. So just stay tuned. But again, thank you both for your service and the whole group's service to our community.
Could we invite them up for a picture?
Of course, I think it's a great idea. Come on forward if you'd like. We'll get a photo for posterity.
Yeah, while we're doing just also a thank you to the mayor. We're fortunate that he's pedestrian user experience expert and accessibility advocate. So when I've seen him walking, I've learned a lot from you, just pointing out a lot of the things that now annoy me about the pedestrian experience. So
You mean like me?
I really appreciate it. And I can now never unsee some of those things, but it is great to be able to take those lessons learned and apply them to future projects. So thank you.
Thank you. Come on down. Let's get a photo for posterity. The front page of the newspaper. What do you think? You're working that crowd, man. All right, let's move on to council requests. Are there any council requests at this time? Did you have one, Mr. Snyder? I'm sorry.
I do, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, several citizens mentioned tonight the T-zones and raised questions, and so hopefully we can discuss those when the T-zone issue comes up, and staff will be prepared to discuss some of the questions that were raised, the questions that were raised tonight. Thank you.
Okay, other comments from anyone? Vice Mayor Hardy?
Did. As a follow-up on the Oak Street Bridge detour, I checked in with a few neighbors there. I know that some of the signage has disappeared and changed. Mr. Shields, have we figured out kind of the right detour signage, and are we getting any concerns on safety with people rerouting through the neighborhoods?
So the Oak Street Bridge is underway. It is a project that's being managed by VDOT, which is unusual for the city. The city, we were not happy with their original signage plan, and so we did intervene with them to ask them to improve it, and they implemented those changes on Friday. And so I think it is clear to the public now that the road is closed. It will be for about 10 months while the Oak Street Bridge is being replaced. And there is a detour route that is more clearly signed. I think there were frankly, some errors in their original signage. So I believe that those have all been corrected. Happy to have any further feedback on it, but hopefully the residents of the street and the traveling public have a better sign package now.
Okay. As of this morning, the one at Oak and Seton has disappeared. There's no sign. The big one is no longer at the corner at the top of the hill from Oak Street Elementary. And so for people coming in off Marshall, going that way, and then passing Oak Street, they won't know that it's closed. So I'm not sure if it was intentionally removed or just temporarily removed. The one at the other side of South Oak and Broad, I think, is still there, and I think it's been corrected now that says road is closed, which is helpful, so people don't go down the street. But you probably want it in both directions. So it'd be good feedback to
So
I
at Oak
noticed
and
that.
Seton, the sign is missing?
The big
one.
The big flashing sign, and I wasn't sure if like that was temporary,
Yes.
but it was obviously gone this morning.
Yep.
Okay.
So we only have one sign as of right now for only southbound traffic, so northbound traffic still needs one.
Okay.
Thank you. Second request, I know that we're going to talk about this as part of the budget amendment, because I think the schools are asking for it as part of their budget amendment part of it, but the status of the demographer that we've talked about funding, can we get an update on where that stands?
So we have had a meeting with the schools. We're working out the scope of work for contracted services for the demography study. That has gone a little slower than I think either of us would like, but we do have now a draft scope of work, and so we'll have one more discussion on that with the schools, and then plan to take that out as a request for proposals.
Do we have a target date on when we expect the report back to us?
So I would hope to have the data back to us by fall, and so it can go into capital planning and for budget planning for next year.
Great. And then two kind of scheduling items that I've mentioned in mayor's meetings, and I think it relates to public comment we've gotten tonight, as well as the CACT's report. I'd love to make sure we close the loop on the Great Streets project. So based on the public input we've gotten, while we were at 30% design, before we get to 60% design, before that gets presented to us, I'd love to know where we are with the community input we've received from Bike Falls Church, and just, again, close the loop. So we said, hey, here's what we're addressing, here's what's being incorporated, here's what we can't do, here's what the bike boulevard will accomplish, or maybe the bike lane idea is still on the table. But I think that's an important discussion to have before design is finalized. And then the second scheduling item is, I know the master bike plan was also referenced in the CACT report, and so are we going to get an update on the recommendations from that tech studio class?
So we could arrange a work session for that. I think in thinking, working with the CACT on its work plan, we wanted to get through the update to the NTC program and then take up the bike master plan. I think that we're close to wrapping up the NTC program, so we're looking forward to engaging with community on the bike plan.
Great, because I know we're going to get continued requests to do bike infrastructure, but I know that we wanted to wait for the master plan to be developed and the recommendations so it fits into the holistic recommendation. So thank you. I look forward to both of those. That's it.
All right, anything else? If not, let's go on to the report of the city manager, Mr. Shields.
Thank you. I'll just have a few things to report on. One, I do want to just let the council and community be aware that the Planning Commission will have its meeting next Wednesday, and they're going to take a look at the capital improvements program. Ms. Subsey and Ms. Mester have presented it to the Planning Commission at their meeting 2 weeks ago, but that was about at midnight, and so after a very full public hearing. The highlights are this is a $152 million capital improvements program. We do not anticipate issuing any debt in the current fiscal year or next year or the year after. And so it just underscores the level of grants that the city's been able to go out there and bring home for the taxpayers of the city. $93 million of transportation funded grants, $24 million in sanitary sewer, $12 million in stormwater projects, and $24 million for park, schools, and general government facilities, largely, again, grant funded. So a lot in that CIP. We'll have a discussion with the City Council on that after budget presentation. So look forward to that in April. But on Wednesday this week, the CIP will be before the Planning Commission. In addition, the Planning Commission also will be taking a look at outdoor dining. And as the council is aware, but we just want to make sure the community is aware, we facilitated outdoor dining with the pandemic, and now we want to make some of those rules permanent so that the restaurant community knows what it can do and what it can't do for outdoor dining going forward. And there would be a permitting process with that for new outdoor restaurant applications, and an ongoing inspection process for the existing ones, mainly to make sure that we're in compliance with ADA, fire safety, and other such important public safety interests. But the Planning Commission will be taking a look at that also on Wednesday, and then that will come back to the City Council for your final consideration. We're currently scheduled at the end of this month on March 27th. So those are two things I wanted to note. Also for the public, if you'll look out this week in your mail, home property assessments and commercial property assessments we expect will be mailed this week. And there's those notices all have full information for property owners in the city to look over your assessments. If you have any questions about it, the assessment will provide numbers to call. And of course, any of your appeal rights are contained in that notice as well. For the City Council's interest, the overall assessments are an increase of 4.65%. Which is about a 0.7% increase over what we noted back in the fall, with the majority of that increase coming on the commercial side, with the new construction that is happening in the city. The residential assessments are largely aligned with what we were forecasting back when we got together back in December. So those are three things I wanted to update the City Council on. Last thing I will note is the city's home ownership program in partnership with NHP Foundation is underway. There are 3 homes currently under contract that NHP has been able to get under contract. And we are looking forward to working with clients who are eligible to repurchase those homes with covenants on them to protect them as affordable for the next 99 years. For people who are interested in that program, you can find out about it through fallschurchahp.org. That's fallschurchahp.org, which the AHP stands for Affordable Housing Program or Affordable Home Ownership Program. And I look forward to working with community on this program to expand affordability in the home ownership area. Happy to answer any questions that we have.
All right, thank you. Mr. Snyder?
Thanks. Mr. City Manager, the definition of commercial has been raised by several citizens. Commercial suggests retail, office, but when you're talking about commercial for this purpose, you're also throwing in apartments, is that right?
Yes, it's office, retail, and apartments.
Right. So if you separated apartments, which are residences in most people's minds, then it would be interesting to see what the data show. And then how various projects have done in reality versus their projection on day one, where all the modeling day one is all the shops are open, all the restaurants are open. So it would be interesting to do an historic perspective of how these projects have done vis-a-vis the projections.
All right, other questions or comments? Vice Mayor Hardy?
Thank you. Going back to the AVs, I know this is probably in the press release, but what is the median home value now in Falls Church with this increase in assessments?
I don't have that figure in front of me. We'll put that together for budget presentation, but I don't think we've run that median home value quite yet.
Okay. And then for the Affordable Home Ownership Program, one thing I learned in the Housing Commission meeting last week is that while we currently prioritize people who live and work in the city, we actually have a sub-prioritization within there that people who work for city government or the schools also get higher priority. So that's a great benefit we should probably publicize more and talk about as some of our employees.
And I just do want to let you know that we are publicizing that with our workforce quite regularly. And it's really important for our workforce to be able to live close to where they work, and it can be just a really wonderful benefit. I think technically, on the rating scale, I think they're equal, current residents and people who work in the city. But we do just have that megaphone with our own workforce and with our teachers to really make sure that they're aware of the program and can participate with it.
All right, Ms. Leon?
Mr. Shields, would you, once those contracts close and the dollars are stable, would you be able to provide an update of what the remaining balance is that's available to deploy for the purchase of additional homes under NHP?
Yeah, so I'll talk with staff just about having kind of a regular reporting process for this, and we'll try to get that sort of in the battle rhythm on this going forward.
That would be great. Thank you.
Mr. Snyder?
Thanks. Another data point, how many apartments have been added in the last 20 years, and how many of those apartments are affordable?
Okay, other comments? All right, let's move on to, I'm sorry, okay, yes, Ms. Conley.
Just one more question on the NHP program, Mr. Shields. If someone knows of a house that is available, may be available, or a condo, what do they do? Who do they contact to say, I'd like to suggest that this house be part of the NHP program?
So we do have local realtors who are very well versed in the local market helping NHP. For residents that have that information, they could go to that website, I think probably, and contact NHP directly.
Okay.
Or send a note to staff and we would forward it on to NHP.
Okay, so how the realtors are, how are the realtors working as part of this?
NHP, I believe, is contracted with a local realtor to help them with acquisition.
Okay, very good, thank you.
All right, let's move on to business on the agenda then. Madam Clerk, will you call the first item?
Yes, on first reading, we have TO 23-02, ordinance to amend ordinances 2024, 2045, and 2056 regarding the budget of expenditures and revenues, appropriating funds for fiscal year 2023 for the general fund, the school operating fund, school community service fund, the cable access fund, and the capital improvement program funds.
Good evening, Mayor Tarter, members of the council. So we brought the second budget amendment for the current fiscal year for discussion at the last work session, and that included funding allocation for prior year 2 CIP projects in lieu of debt, appropriation of grants and reimbursements, and movement of department budgets to align with the internal organization changes that were done in July. And in addition to that, we have 3 new requests included in this first reading, and I will quickly highlight those. The school board adopts their budget tomorrow, fiscal year 2024. They have a request included in there for use of their one-time funds. They are requesting $237,285 in fiscal year 22 year-end funds, one-time funds for mainly, I'll call out the big ones for baseball field improvements, and then playground improvements at JDP, and some other improvements, flagpole for softball and basketball fields at Meridian, and some of those kind of improvements. In addition to that, they are requesting $613,000 in pandemic-related grants, and those are for these are in addition to the ARPA funds that they received, and these are for contract length extensions that they have implemented, support for special education of students, and advancing some of the other positions, the academics coordinator, instructional software technology, and curriculum changes. And in addition to that, they're requesting $290,515, which were previously encumbered. So this is just a carry forward request of these funds for collective bargaining. And these were appropriated last year's budget, and they got carried forward. So we're using that from the fund balance. And the last request on the school side is requesting an appropriation for replacement of the tennis court lights at the secondary campus. And those lights are going to be split 50-50 between the school and the city. And we want to recognize this project in the CIP. The school's portion is coming from their one-time funds, and the city's portion is coming from previously programmed park master plan implementation funds mostly, and then some remnants of Big Chimney Park project, nominal amount there, and Larry Graves turf project, so leftover of reprogramming of those. And lastly, the third request that's included new in this report is we are requesting an appropriation of $60,000 in the FCC TV funds. And these are use of PEG fees, and these would be to make improvements to the FCC TV studio at the Meridian High School, and also to improve FCC TV's live event coverage at Dogwood and the Memorial Day Parade, and also the auditorium events at the Meridian High School. So that concludes my report.
Mr. Duncan.
Thank you, Ms. Bawa. Just a quick question on that, since you're on it, the Cable Access Fund. The capacity that we have here in City Hall to view whatever is being shown on the cable TV station through the monitors that are, on the walls and maybe in some offices. Is that a thing? I remember at one point a couple of years ago, I learned that you can't watch the cable TV station from your office in City Hall, and I thought that could be not good if there's a staffer here who wants to follow what's going on some meeting. Cindy, you probably know about this.
Yeah, I thought I'd step up. We do have Cox installed throughout City Hall in the offices now. Okay. It is Cox that's fed to City Hall, so you can watch the cable station.
Okay, that's good. Two vendors were mentioned. Do we still have the third? What was that? I can't remember. It's the one Chet and Carol have that.
We still have RCN as the third franchise holder. Just a few accounts, though, compared to Cox and Verizon.
Okay. Do they pay us anything, RCN?
They don't pay a PEG fee, as referenced in this. They have contributed annually with each franchise agreement certain things. So when the new high school was built, their contribution was to redo all the main lines into the high school, the head end, because we had to move it from the old high school. So they contribute, but it's a much smaller, not a regular amount.
Okay, all right.
I think that last one's about $25,000.
Okay, all right. All right, thanks.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah, could you bring back up the school request a minute? There was a chart there. I'm hoping that between now and when this comes back to us, that there'll be someone from the schools here that can maybe explain if citizens have any questions. So that's kind of a request that I'd like on the record for the schools.
Are you saying you'd like some school staff here at the second hearing?
Yeah.
Or would you like to provide your question and they can respond in writing?
If they could be here for the second hearing in case there are any questions.
Okay.
And if you go, let's see, continue on through then. And so how much of this is, how much of what's in here for both the schools and the city, is this money that has all, is this new money? Some of it's ARPA money and some of it's...
So the school's request is broken down into 3 pots of money. They're using a portion of their fiscal year 22, last fiscal year's year-end balance savings that they received. They had not appropriated those, the revenue share that was done at that time. So they're requesting an allocation, a portion of that. The second portion is that they're requesting allocation of some grants that they have received, and these are federal and state grants in addition to the ARPA funds. And these are for related expenditures for improvements in programs, technology, and support for special education, those kind of grants that they have received. And then the third portion is carry forward of their previously encumbered funds.
Okay.
And these are all identified in their fiscal year 2024 budget.
Okay.
Because these were monies in their fund balance, but they're identifying a use of these. And it will be on, it's in the budget that's going to the school board tomorrow.
Right. And on the city side, then, how do you divide up?
So the city received an equal amount of tax revenue at that time when we did the fiscal year 2022. And we brought a budget amendment back in October, I want to say, for allocation of most of those funds at that time. So city did the appropriation requests earlier.
Okay, good, thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Leon and then Ms. Conley.
Thank you, Ms. Bawa. First question I have is, trying to wrap my head around it's 237,285. So this is the schools are using the excess general fund tax revenue. So after deploying that, what's remaining balance of their share of the FY22 excess general fund tax revenue that they have not used?
Okay, so it's laid out in the fiscal impact section, and they'd have an estimated operating fund balance of 1.7 million, of which a portion of it is being allocated in the fiscal year 2024 budget. That's page 5 of 10, if you're flipping through the pages. So of that, a portion about a little shy of 500,000 is going to be allocated as part of the fiscal year 2024. They normally use a portion of their fund balance on an ongoing basis in their for one-time needs in their budget. So once we have all those details, we can provide you a revised proposed fund balance. But at this time, with the use of the 237, they'd be left with a 1.7 million.
Okay. We have a policy that for the revenue share that we have with schools that we split, that it could be applied to 2 fiscal years ahead? Did I hear that right? So they're taking 22 excess revenue and they're applying it to 24. I just want to make sure I'm learning here with you.
No.
Is there a policy that we have that policy?
So fiscal year 22 year-end report was presented in October of, and that is the start. We are already in fiscal year 23 when we present the report, because when we close the fiscal year, we came back, the city came back immediately with a budget amendment in late October, early November, with allocation of our portion of the tax revenues. And now they're coming just a few months later. That was November. Now they provided it as part of their January proposed budget, superintendent's proposed budget. And since we have a budget amendment that's coming to council, so they are just identifying how they would utilize those funds.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is page 8 of 10, we had agreed to a certain allocation for schools, and it's FY23 as previously adopted. And I'm trying to understand, well, with this proposal, TO 23-02, it is increasing. So my understanding is we were going to allocate the monies that were approved at 59 million. So in my head, I'm trying to understand where this motion is going, that we're now increasing the allocation from 59 to 60 million. So it's,
Okay, so let me go a little bit
staying
high level and
59 million?
explain this. So the action has already been done by council to allocate the revenue share to the schools. This is more administrative because now they're coming and saying, this is what we're going to do with the money. Their board adopts that, their charter allows them to use the funds that they've been given, one-time funds for one-time uses, and then the operating that we give them in the beginning of. So this is coming for action because when we gave them the one-time money, it went into their fund balance. At that time, they didn't know exactly what they were going to do. They did it as part of their fiscal year 24 budget proposal. So now it's coming back to council for a parallel action to approve what their school board is adopting. But these funds have already been allocated, transferred to the school as part of the revenue share of the year end that we did it back in October.
I guess the numbers indicate it hasn't, because here on page 10, it's increasing that allocation.
So it was sitting in their fund balance. Now they're appropriating those funds.
Yeah.
So
Bottom line, we're increasing the allocation from what we already voted to reflect this?
No.
No.
We're not increasing. We're only moving from school fund balance to the school budget. As far as the city is concerned, we moved that money to the schools back in October.
Okay. Even though it's increasing on the school fund balance.
So with this action, the fund balance is going to,
I'm reading it on page 10. It's going up.
Right, I'm looking at line 93.
I'm looking at line 93 on page 8 out of 10.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at too.
I have no issue. It's, I'm looking at the allocation and the intended use of it, and I think it's great. I'm just trying to wrap my head around, are we increasing the allocation, are we not? And if we are, understood, and no issues from how it's allocated and what's proposed. I'm just trying to understand from a change, right, in that number. It's reflected as a change, whereas I understood this to be allocating what was already provided and approved.
If I may jump
Okay.
in quickly. So we have increased since we did the FY22 budget. So to your question, Caroline, we did increase since the FY22 budget, because FY22 budget was adopted for, I can scroll up, I can't see that column, but is now increasing to 60 million.
53 million, yeah.
We haven't increased, though, because we did say we would split the excess revenues. So we made that decision in November.
and we transferred the school share to them at that time when the council did that. So now there are allocations happening on both sides. The city, when we did the the revenue share, we made the transfer to the schools. The schools received an allocation, it went into their fund balance.
Okay.
But when they have to come and ask for, I want to spend it on so-and-so, it's an appropriation request. So now the money comes out of the fund balance and goes into their revenue. We recognize the revenue and we recognize the expenditure, so that increases the appropriation request.
Okay, so it's moving from the fund balance to the revenue
Correct.
side on the school's books. Okay. All right.
Ms. Gottlieb?
I almost forgot what I was going to ask because I just got wrapped into what you were saying.
Sorry about that.
So that, just to follow up on what Ms. Leon just said, so the increase to the 60 million there on line 93, page 8 of 10, that matches what the general government has already done to bring it up to, not necessarily. All right, don't even go there.
So,
'cause
okay, let me
that'll just
try
confuse
one more
people more.
time. We gave
Okay.
the schools 1.165 million
Extra
extra
at the end when we
at the
split
end
the
of
revenue.
fiscal year
Right.
22. They put all of it in the fund balance.
Because they said we aren't quite ready to spend it
We
yet,
don't know what
but
we're
we have
going to
a
do with it.
plan.
We have to identify the one-time needs. So they went through their whole budget development, and then they came back and they said, well, you want to use 237 of that on these XYZ one-time needs. So this is what
Okay.
So the 237 is not going to match the 1165, but on the city side, we have moved all the funds over to them. Now, this is administrative on their part. They want to use from fund balance.
Got it.
They want to identify.
So I don't remember ever us approving that kind of moving that the schools have done in their budget. I guess we have, but I don't remember that as a thing that we've done in the past. I thought in the past, it would just go into their fund balance, and then they would spend it as they saw fit.
We've done that.
We've done that?
We've always done that,
Okay.
yeah.
Just because I don't remember doesn't mean it hasn't happened. It just
If
didn't
you
stand out to
recall,
me before.
they bought an electric bus, and there were a
Right.
slew of needs that they had last year when they got the year-end fund. So
Okay. So that all
and they
gets-
used for premium pay for specific employees.
Mm-hmm.
They used portion ARPA and portion year-end funds, so a lot of it was done. And it's always, any appropriation request on either side goes through the council.
Okay. So my request is simpler. It's a semantic request, and that is that we're doing such a good job in the Budget and Finance Committee saying the schools and the general government, but on line 126, it says this project is jointly funded with the city. So I just, as a rule, we should be saying the schools and the general government make up the whole city, as opposed to the schools versus the city.
Noted.
Thank you.
All right, Vice Mayor Hardy.
Thank you. So I also want to spend time on the school part of it, mainly because I think this was not in our work session. It was newly added, so I want to make sure I'm crystal clear. So the school's requesting 1.1 million total in new appropriations. What makes up the 1.1, and stop me if I'm wrong, Ms. Bawa, 237 of that is from the surplus revenue sharing for FY22 that we talked about. 600,000 is pandemic grants. 290 is carry forward from collective bargaining that they didn't use in previous years.
Correct.
So about 900,000 out of the 1.1 million is one-time money. The carry forward is operating-ish money, correct?
But it becomes one time because it's earmarked for a specific purpose.
So where I'm going with this is more of a policy question that I think we've talked about before. When I look through, and I guess the schools obviously have in their charter, they get to determine how they want to use it, but there's some one-time requests in there, but there's also a good amount of operating needs, and I know we've struggled with this on the ARPA funding side.
Exactly.
But I want to make sure that we are very clear that we are using a good number of those one-time funds for operating needs and what sort of kind of structural issues this causes in future budgets. And so maybe at second reading, we should talk about how big that hole is that we are digging ourselves into.
Okay.
And I know that we're guilty of this as well on the general government side. But while we are getting lost in all these numbers, I think that big policy question is really important because I want to make sure we are very clear going into FY24 how much we're dependent on one-time money for. And so when the money runs out, we need to figure out how to plug it with operating dollars. So that's kind of the first policy kind of question. The second is related to what Ms. Leon talked about towards the bottom under the fiscal impact. So if I understand this correctly, the schools had $1.7 million in fund balance. They're going to use $957,000 in their FY24 budget. So two policy questions. One is, do the schools or does the general government have a policy on how much can be kept in this fund balance surplus? And then the second related one is, how much is supposed to be used for the upcoming budget year? I know we've talked briefly about it in Budget and Finance, but I don't know whether we arrived at a policy on either of those. But I do think that 1.7 feels like a decent number. I don't know whether it's big or not and how it benchmarks to what we've had in the past. I think the number has been bigger than 1.7 million in the past.
It has been, and they have identified over the last couple of budget amendments the use of it. So if my memory serves me right, it is a 2% of total expenditures that they can have.
That's their internal policy of how much they can have.
Correct.
So 2% out of the 60 million.
Their 60 million budget, correct. And if they were to go above it, they need to identify ways of
how long they have to
allocating
draw
those
down
funds
from
and
it
how long it'll take to come within the policy. So.
Okay. So that's probably worth recapping where we are with that because it just stood out as a pretty big number. And while it's good that, again, we're using $950,000 of it in the upcoming budget, again, I want to make sure we are very careful about using one-time dollars in operating, and so we're clear in implications of that.
Sure.
And then the last point, which I think Ms. Connolly touched on, is I love that we are collaborating on the lighting at Meridian Tennis Courts. I think sharing the cost really meets that spirit of that community school that we promised the community in the 2017 referendum. So that was good to see.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
All right, other comments? Any public comment? See none, the matter is closed to the public. Anything else from council? Do we have a motion?
I move to grant first reading to TO 23-02.
Second.
Ms. Leon on the second. Madam Clerk?
I'm sorry, we had to update the motion to schedule the public hearing for a date certain. Can we amend that?
The motion, you want the motion to reflect?
That'd be great if we could have that.
All right, Ms. Conley, do you
It's up
mind
on the
making that
screen,
motion
sorry.
again?
I'm sorry. Yes?
What's on the screen?
Oh, move to grant first reading to TO 23-02, schedule public hearing, second reading and final consideration for March 13th, 2023.
Second.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's call the next item.
We have TR 23-06, resolution to amend special exception SE 04-0162, as previously amended through resolution 2012-01, to further amend certain commercial use restrictions on the ground floor spaces at 400 to 412 South Maple Avenue, Pearson Square.
Mr. Shields?
Thank you, Mayor Tarter, members of council. The council is requested to approve a special exception amendment to further modify the ground floor commercial restrictions at the Pearson Square building. Mr. Jeff Hollern is our lead planner for this item, and Gary Fuller is our senior planner on this item. I'll turn it over to them for a staff report, and I believe we have legal counsel representing Pearson Square on this call as well, but maybe we'll start with a staff report and then we'll allow the owner to provide information to the city council as well. The request tonight is to refer this to the Planning Commission, and then it would come back to the council for final consideration on March 27th. Mr. Hollern?
Thank you, Wyatt. Good evening, Mayor Tarter and members of the City Council. I'm Jeff Hollern with the planning staff. City Council is requested to approve a special exception amendment application to further modify the ground floor commercial restrictions for council for referral to the Planning Commission for review and recommendation, and to schedule public hearing and final consideration for council for March 27th, 2023. Pearson Square is an existing mixed-use development consisting of two buildings. 400 South Maple Avenue is now known as the Tax Analyst Building, but the subject of tonight's application is 410 South Maple Avenue, just known as Pearson Square. It contains 230 multifamily residential units and approximately 19,000 square feet of ground floor retail commercial space. The property is zoned B3 and it sits within the South Washington Street Planning Opportunity Area. The applicant is seeking to lease approximately 1,600 square feet of currently vacant space to an architectural firm. Under the current commercial programming restrictions, which is established by Condition 3 in the Resolution 2012-01, which went with the project's approval, the allowable square footage for office uses has been reached. With this request, the applicant would like to increase the overall allowable retail service square footage limit from 11,000 square feet to 14,000 square feet, and would like to increase the business or professional office limit from 2,400 to 4,000 square feet, so long as it stays within the new overall limit of 14,000. The applicant is also requesting to increase the maximum lease term from 10 years to 20 years for business, professional, medical, or dental office uses. On line 44 of the staff report, we include a table which summarizes the current building program along with the requested changes to be made with this application. Please note that the previous Pearson Square approvals, that the commercial programming was established within the resolution. And so part of this requested action is to define commercial programming through voluntary concessions, which would put this project to be more consistent with more recent special exception projects. Text changes made to the development condition number 3 that would be added to the voluntary concessions begins on line 53 of the staff report. Beginning on line 91 of the staff report, staff has outlined the history of changes made to the commercial plan at the Pearson Square, starting with its initial approval in 2004, which was then amended several times between 2007 and 2012. I'm going to scroll down to the staff analysis section on line 51 of the staff report. Staff review is ongoing for consistency with the primary and secondary criteria for the special exceptions applications. Staff is reviewing the proposed amendments to ensure that they still include significant new or renovated commercial space, while allowing for flexibility to accommodate changes in the commercial marketplace and leasing. Staff is also reviewing for ways to simplify the proposed language to ensure consistency in administering commercial restrictions as part of voluntary concessions. So timing on this project, we have tonight's City Council meeting. We are hoping to get a referral to Planning Commission on this application, which they can see it as soon as this Wednesday on March 1st. They would then host hopefully a public hearing on March 15th, and it would be back before council on the last 2 Mondays of this month, or March, I should say. With that, I will turn it back over to Mayor Tarter if there's any questions or comments. I also know that we have the applicant team here tonight who would like to share a brief presentation on their application as well. Thank you.
And so the applicant is here, maybe in the room. You're welcome to give a short presentation if you'd like. Welcome.
Mayor Turner, members of the council, my name is Zach Williams. I'm a land use attorney with the law firm of Venable. Here tonight with me is Matt Lee, an architect who is hoping to be able to locate his new architecture studio and office at this location. And I do have a very brief presentation, which I can go through quickly in the interest of time. So as members of the council may be familiar with the Pearson Square apartment building, this was an entitlement that was approved in 2004. It currently includes 230 apartment buildings as well as retail along street front on South Maple. This is just an aerial view of the building as well as the arrow pointing to the retail bay that the architecture studio is hoping to take possession of. Next slide, please. This is a street level view of the retail spaces in the Pearson Square project, and specifically the space that's currently vacant and where the architecture studio would be located if this application were to be approved. Next slide, please. A couple of reasons for why the applicant is requesting the change. The applicant has spent several years looking for a tenant. This location has located an excellent local business to occupy the space, Mr. Lee and his architecture studio, that would bring as many as 10 new jobs to this location. The pandemic has made it difficult, as I'm sure the council knows, to find retail tenants. Particularly in the city, a lot of the newer projects are attracting tenants, and some of the older projects, it's just a little bit more difficult to fill those spaces. And so having found that tenant and excited about that tenant, it would be an attractive use. We'll look at, in the next slide, we'll look at some of the renderings there as well. It would be an attractive street level use. And it would be a great location for a local business to operate out of. And that concludes my presentation. We're here for any questions if the council has any. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate the brevity. So let's go on to questions or comments from council. Are there any questions or comments? Mr. Duncan.
Thank you. It's not normally my custom to bring up parking because it usually turns out we have plenty of parking when we bring new businesses in, but just because the Byron SE that we discussed recently got itself wrapped around the axle of parking, there, I feel like equity demands that we talk a little bit about that. I noticed in your attachment 4 that, show that there's 64 spaces in the building dedicated to retail parking. Any And maybe Gary or Jeff can give us historic perspective, any comparison between what we thought was going to go into a space like this, which was sort of a retail use, as opposed to an office use, and the impact that has on parking.
Yeah, there's more than sufficient parking in the parking deck, or the parking garage, I should say, within the building. And I don't know if Mr. Lee and his employees would be driving to the space, but I assume they would. But as far as I'm aware, there's going to be sufficient parking provided for that particular use in the building.
Jeff, Gary, any historical data that we have about how many spaces we allocated to this square footage when we thought it was going to be essentially a retail store operation? If I may.
Yeah, this is Gary Fuller, Deputy Planning Director. Yes, we used a shopping center rate because of the number of storefronts that were there. And so it's been adequate. I know we've done some surveys of all the mixed-use projects, and we found that those 64 spaces have been adequate during those surveys. We've had no issues down there reported. So I would say that the parking is adequate and functions well there for the uses.
Okay, great. Thank you. Look forward to having this exciting new business in town. Thanks.
Other questions or comments? Ms. Sardi?
Great, thank you. Questions for staff. So given that, I think this is now the 6th SE amendment at Pearson since it opened in 2004. I guess next time we see this, or maybe for the Planning Commission, can we break down what the original commercial versus residential percentage was when the project was approved, and be able to break it down from office, I guess within commercial office versus service retail versus kind of retail goods, and then what is being requested now?
In terms of square footage?
Yeah, when we normally get those ratios, I think it's gross square footage.
Yeah, I think we could do that. The table that was included did show the original, and then what we are proposing with this, and then each of the resolutions that amended the retail restriction. Basically, it started off at 0 because it was only retail with goods that you sell kind of out the door. Then it was 8,000, then 11,000. Now we're looking to go to 14,000 ceiling on that, and that's out of a total of 19,000 that's programmed originally there. So, yeah. So in terms of the ratio, I think we could work through that table and kind of figure that out. The major change when we lifted it from 8,000 to 11,000 was for the body dynamics, which represented a significant amount of the, non-retail that we allowed in there. That's been since 2012, 10 years.
Yep, and the reason why I asked that is not necessarily just to make you do math, Gary, but more I think to show the evolution of, while I think we had good intentions in 2004, but clearly retail's been changing even before the pandemic. And I think it's important for us to be supportive of adding more foot traffic and daytime population and kind of react to the current environment. So I think it's just important to see that evolution. My second request is, given that we just looked at an SE amendment at the Byron a couple weeks ago, and I think what we had heard from their attorney was that the average lease term they're seeing in the industry is around 10 years, and I see that we're asking for 20 years here. Do we have any information from brokers, or is 20 years reasonable?
The statements for Gary Fuller again with planning. The statements, made at the Byron. You had a realtor, commercial realtor, well-known company that was representing that, and they seem to indicate that there's a need for longer-term leases, and usually it's there's a base 5-10 years, and then there's a renewal if they want to stay, and in terms of the investment they make in it. Originally, we had this restriction didn't start in 2004, but when we started to put the restrictions to allow non-retail goods out the door uses, we did add the lease restriction on the hopes that after 10 years, you know, the marketplace would encourage those retail with goods out the doors to, you know, pick up some of those leases along the way. And so we really haven't seen that with the market. And so a lot of leases, if they're going to invest money, they want to have the chance to renew and to stay in their location. So that's what we heard at Byron. So, yeah, from the realtor standpoint.
Okay. And then the third one, I'm just thinking ahead, is how much space does Creative Cauldron occupy? And are they in the service retail? I guess, what do they
3,000 square feet.
qualify as?
We actually, yeah, we classify them in the, let's see, I think they were classified in the retail. Yeah.
For goods or for service?
For the goods.
Okay. And so knowing that they're going to vacate when Broad and Washington opens in 18 months, that's something that I don't think we need to solve for now, but I want to make sure we are all aware of it. That will be another issue that we'll have to deal with potentially.
Yeah.
Great. So in general, I guess, again, I'm supportive of being flexible. And I think especially in the post-COVID world where I think getting any office use and adding 10 jobs and foot traffic is a good thing. I look forward to seeing this back again. Thank you.
Other comments, questions? So I would just say, I'm going to vote for this tonight, but I don't want to give up on retail in this city, and this notion that, you know, if we can't have any retail, it's not going to succeed, I think is incorrect. And I think we do need to continue to fight to maintain places that sell things here in the city and not just services, professional services in particular. So, again, I'm supportive of this, but I do want to sort of put down the marker that I think overall in this city, we need to maintain as much and as strong a retail presence as we can to create a vibrant community, to create a solid tax base, which I think in general is much better served by sales tax than B-poll tax that you'll find with professional services. So to my mind, there's a lot of reasons why we want to continue to have strong retail presence in the city. That being said, I understand the market is changing. COVID has changed things, maybe on a temporary basis, maybe on a permanent basis. We don't know yet. That remains to be seen. But anyway, just want to put down that marker for further consideration. And unless anyone has anything else to say, do we have a motion that anyone would like to make?
Mr. Mayor, I move to refer TR 23-06 to the Planning Commission for review and recommendations to the City Council and schedule public hearing final consideration for March 27th, 2023, and advertise the same according to law.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, before
Second.
All right, we have a second and a third. We'll have Debbie on the third. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to the next item, please.
Yes, we have TR 23-08, resolution to approve the memorandum of agreement among Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University, the Virginia Department of Transportation, and the City of Falls Church, Virginia for Falls Church Smart City Program, UPC number 122909, and to also authorize the city manager to sign the locally administered program agreement and related documents.
Mr. Shields? Or is that Ms.
Good
Mester?
evening, council. Let me do a brief overview and then entertain any questions. This is the $10 million grant that we received from the state back in FY21. Originally, that grant was to be administered by Virginia Tech, VTTI, their Transportation Technology Innovation Arm. Then the federal funding switch made them ineligible, so last June we did a resolution setting the city up to administer the program. That became challenging with the procurement regulations for highway funds on an innovative technology program. So we've been working with VDOT. They switched the money back to state, not federal. So this item before you is a governance change again for this program, but it's good and positive. So what will happen is Virginia Tech and VTTI will be the programmatic, fiscal, and administrative agent. The city will still be at the table in the partnership, but the money will go straight from VDOT to Virginia Tech and the VTTI arm. So that's very positive, so we can get back on track for actually executing on this program. The resolution that before you would adopt the memorandum of understanding that outlines the roles and responsibilities of the three parties, and it also repeals the resolution from last June so that the city would no longer be the locally administrated program fiscal agent responsible. So we'd undo that and go to the MOA. The MOA was collaboratively put together with VDOT, Virginia Tech, and the city to clarify the roles and responsibilities and give us some options if we need to revise in the future, because we're dealing with technology and innovation and not all components are totally fleshed out at this point. But all parties from a programmatic standpoint are very satisfied with the MOA. And I will note that we have had a lot of good legal review and advice on this. We've had the city attorney involved, the VDOT attorneys, and Virginia Tech attorneys. And so staff recommendation is to approve this resolution that's before you, so we can proceed with redoing our traffic signals and looking at some smart intersections and so forth for West Falls, the city's traffic signals, all the way through the Virginia Tech to the WMATA redevelopment projects.
All right, well, thank you so much. Thank you for your fine work on this. And also, Senator Saslaw was instrumental, who is retiring.
Indeed.
Unfortunately, was instrumental in the city getting this grant, frankly, plenty other grants. So our thanks go out to him. Let's go ahead and open it up to questions and comments. Mr. Snyder?
Thanks a lot, Mr. Mayor. My questions go to really what sorts of technology can be developed and worked with through this. It seems that the list of specifics is pretty traditional stuff, stoplights and, that kind of stuff that I guess one would ordinarily expect the developer to put in, but if we're going to do it with this, then they don't have to do that. So what really, is there enough flexibility here that we can talk about, for example, an autonomous transit vehicle, EVs, where's the kind of experimental element to this? Maybe you can explain to me too where the flexibility is that we can evolve with technology.
Sure. So lines 185 of the staff report do outline the broad categories as originally drafted when this went to the General Assembly and the funding was appropriated. And it is looking at new technologies and research going beyond what we know now for smart intersections or parking garages and so forth. So it is to pick up some changing technologies and ways of transmitting it, whether it's, laser or conduits. It wasn't initially planned to do EV or autonomous vehicles, but VTTI, as you know, has done that with the Merrifield to Mosaic route. So I think as we get into the details, this is flexible enough that we can work with VDOT to amend the scope if we have sufficient funding and new technology comes up, because we would want the smart intersections to be able to accommodate EVs going through and chargers in the area, or collaborate with the private developer who's putting in EVs. So there'll be can be some adaptation beyond what you see here. One of the things to our advantage is originally this grant was going to fund $2 million to conduct the road across the Virginia Tech property that would connect West Falls to WMATA. And now that, because of the purchase sales agreement that City Council has executed, we're able to put that $2 million back into this grant, so it'll give us a little more flexibility on what we can do.
Could I just follow up, Mr. Mayor? Can you show me the language that provides us the flexibility?
Well, in the MOA, there's in the MOA, first thing I'll go to is line 372, where there's modifications, so we can mutually modify by written agreement, and that would tie to the scope. Okay. And then And we'll ask the city attorney if he sees anything really quickly while I'm flipping the signs. We've done some loose definitions, like mission critical and supplemental that aren't totally defined, so we have some flexibility there. Brian?
Yeah, so Councilmember, obviously there's the general categories that Ms. Mester alluded to a few moments ago, but there's fairly broad ability to amend this agreement if anything new comes up or if new technologies are developed during the pendency of the agreement. So I think we're satisfied that there's as much flexibility in this as possible under the parameters of how the grant was awarded.
Right, so what I'm taking from both of the comments is that perhaps in addition to the specific categories that we've talked about, lights and that sort of thing, that on the agreement of the parties, we can look at some technology that may be in the vehicle, for example, as opposed to on the street, or...
I think the best answer we can give to that at this point is that it's possible. I mean, we do need to abide by the general categories as much as possible, which is this is an equipment grant and a technology grant with respect to equipment. However, having said that, there is the ability to amend, as I noted, if other categories, and if there's funds available from what's left of what has been granted. So it may not be as broad as you're looking for.
I liked your response before you got right to the end, so...
No, it's fine. It's fine. It may not be as broad as you're looking for. I mean, there are general parameters to the use of the funds, but there is the ability to amend if the parties agree.
And I think that's also why we've put in language that specify who owns, who maintains, and that a separate agreement could be executed to clarify that based on future technology. Because if we end up with EVs or autonomous, we're going to have to figure out who owns and maintains that. So we have that flexibility too. We know who owns the traffic signals. We know who's going to be doing the parking garages or under the CSA for West Falls, who maintains and who owns. But we have the flexibility to address that as well as modify in writing. So this is why it was really important. Your questions are exactly why we needed to not have this federal highway money, which was very road procurement, and we couldn't make the square peg fit in the round hole. We have the flexibility, but we don't know what all is there yet because it's a research project. So for sure, I'll take this note back to our project manager and the VTTI people who are totally into that, what you're bringing up. They've done scooters, they've done smart roads with different asphalts, a lot of, they'd love to be innovative.
Yeah, so we're not limited. Theoretically, we'd be able to look at the vehicle side of things in addition to the highway side with the agreement of the parties. That's what I'm hearing. All right, well, I'm not going to ask any more questions. That got the answers that I was truly interested in, because this is an area evolving very rapidly, and I want to make sure that we can get maximum use of this. It is experimental, and so I want to be experimental, so.
Yeah, the core grant was talking about infrastructure redevelopment demonstration project. So if we can get within infrastructure and a demonstration and how they connect together with smart technology.
Yeah, the connected vehicle and connected to the infrastructure is certainly a part of the development. Yes. Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions or comments? All right, let's go ahead and see. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Do we have a resolution, or do we have a motion anyone would like to make?
Mr. Mayor, I'd move to adopt TR 23-08.
Second.
All right, we have a second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah.
Mayor Charter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, council.
Thank you. Let's move on to the consent agenda.
Oh, we have one more item.
Oh, did I miss something?
Yeah. At TR 23-07.
Should I read? Let me go look at the glasses on. Hang on a second. Sorry.
It's the resolution to adopt the Northern Virginia Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan 2022 update.
Sorry, yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and hear that. I'm so very sorry to everyone.
And so we have Mr. Mike Stady, who's our Deputy Emergency Management Coordinator, who will provide the report tonight. But he's joined by our emergency manager, Mr. Joe Carter, who this is, I think, the first time he's been before City Council since he has been recognized as our 2020 Employee of the Year and really helped lead the whole government enterprise through the pandemic. And that the city's highest honor was given to Joe for his exemplary work during that very difficult time. So, Joe, it's great to see you here tonight. Thank you for your work on this plan and for everything you do for the city. And we'll turn it over to Mr. Stady for a briefing on the regional all hazards mitigation plan.
Good evening, Mayor Tartar, Vice Mayor Hardy, and members of the council. Good evening, the audience. I am Mike Stady. I'm acting as the Deputy Emergency Management Coordinator. I'm going to present you a brief on the Northern Virginia Hazard Mitigation Plan update. The Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000 requires all localities to adopt a hazard mitigation plan and update it every 5 years. Through the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, funds were awarded to conduct this 5-year update on region-wide basis. The Northern Virginia Hazard Mitigation Plan update, it's a multi-jurisdictional plan with 20 localities, including the City of Falls Church, aim to reduce the impact of the full range of natural and man-made hazards facing the region. This plan is a requirement for federal and state mitigation and preparedness grants, as well as grants and reimbursements on recovery efforts in the event of the disaster. This plan was submitted to the Virginia Department of Emergency Management on October 28, 2022, and approved on November 21st, 2022. This was followed by a review and submission to FEMA on November 28, 2022. FEMA approved the plan on February 9, 2023, pending adoption by local governments. So the adoption, in our case, adoption by the City Council. For the fiscal impact, there is no fiscal impact. Timing, we need the adoption immediately.
All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
If you have a question, I'll be happy to answer.
Okay. Well, let's see if we do have any questions. Anyone have any questions or comments? Mr. Snyder.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Mayor. This is a very detailed document. I appreciate it. It actually answers a lot of questions. The two that I have is we're heavily reliant on jurisdictional partners. Fairfax County for certain things, Arlington, Fairfax Water. Where's the redundancy in the system? What happens, for example, if Arlington is no longer able to provide us fire service? Or what happens if Fairfax Water fails? That's question number one. Question number two, does the report take adequate cognizance of not only the changes in the climate, but the changes in development patterns, not so much, well, to some extent here, where the floodplains are expanding, encompassing more and more parts of the city. So to what extent are we accounting for more incidents of heavy rainfall and changes driven by climate as well as changes driven by development? And another example would be higher buildings in the city than we've ever had before. I'm thinking particularly of some of the buildings on the West End. To what extent has this plan provided us the way forward to make sure that our resources are adequate to the changes in development here? I'm sorry, those are really like
No.
questions.
I got it. No, I will answer in order. The first question, your first question. We, as a City of Falls Church, independent jurisdiction, are a part of Region 7, Virginia Emergency Management, Department of Emergency Management. It split the entire, state of Virginia in 7 regions. We are part of Region 7, where we work and, help each other with the neighbor jurisdiction. And like you mentioned, Arlington County, Fairfax County, Manassas, all those jurisdictions around us, including Loudoun County. So in case of a natural disaster or even man-made disaster, and if the city's capacities are exceeded, the first thing we do is to look towards our neighbor jurisdiction and ask for help. There is a mutual aid that is coming in our way if it's necessary. In case of Arlington, if we ask Arlington and Arlington doesn't have those resources to come and help us and support us, we move, it's a gradual approach. We move to the next level. We work with Region 7, Virginia Region 7, Virginia Emergency Management Region 7, and we ask the help to, this is a state level, we ask the help from the state. If those capacities are already, exhausted, given to other jurisdiction, if it's a bigger disaster, we go, like I said, it's a gradual, we go to the federal level and we ask FEMA to come and help us. We do all those requests through, we'll do fast those requests using a web EOC. This is a online platform that we are using. And actually, Joe Carter, my colleague, and I, we placed at least a dozen of requests during the COVID-19, and we got aid, help from the state level and even from FEMA in terms of masks, protection masks, gloves, disinfectant, hand disinfectant, during COVID-19 and other materials. So we are prepared. We have plans. We have contingency plans in case of, a natural disaster or man-made disaster. And just to clarify, like you said, our region, the first three, the top three hazards are winter storms, snow, wind, if it's either, in the fall, winter, springtime, summer. And the most, we'll consider the most, I'll say, dangerous, it's flooding. We had some problems with the flooding during the heavy rains. And for that, I will make the transition to, to the answer for your question number 2 and question number 3. I can comprehend them. In this plan, it's actually an update of the 2017 hazard mitigation plan, regional hazard mitigation plan. And in the annex that belongs to the City of Falls Church, Annex 4, if you look in that annex, at the end, there is an appendix which contain the mitigation actions. And those mitigation actions are intended to, like their name said, to mitigate the effects of a hazard of natural disaster. If you look in that table, we identify a lot of actions, and most of them address those problems that are created by flooding and to prevent, the city to not have floods or, I can, if you want, I can, give you an example, citywide flood and level of service study. The city is modeling all of its watersheds, approximately 3 square miles, and all its mapped infrastructure upstream of its defined outfall for flood, inundation, and the level of service the system provides. This will allow us to understand where the hazards lie and develop a list of projects based on raising the level of the infrastructure. There are many mitigation actions that are, that we collect and put in this plan. Of course, this plan is for mitigation. We have other plans, for response in case of natural or man-made disasters. This is a good document, like you mentioned, a very detailed, and think we good, you know, and with those mitigation actions, we also will prevent other further, you know, possible incidents that might be, you know, occur in the city, in our jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you very much. One follow-up question then, and maybe this is for the city manager. Do we have accountability for the mitigation steps being taken in a work plan to ensure that they're actually done?
So I think this plan does identify the hazards and attempts to document them. And then when there are instances, our own emergency response plans, which are linked to this but are different from this, lay out, as Mr. Stady was saying, what our response is in an individual, you know, in a type of event. So in terms of accountability, I think this plan identifies what the hazards are. And in terms of accountability, I don't know, Mr. Stady or Mr. Carter, how would you respond to that question?
In terms of accountability, I just talked with my colleague. We spoke. We are in a permanent connection with other, you know, partners, and you know, for our jurisdiction, we just document those incidents that took place in, you know, and if you look in the Annex 4, you know, there are, you know, mentioned the most important incidents that took place in the city. Most important was, this was a worldwide, you know, it's a COVID-19. Other thing?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that, you know, this plan is made up of all the stakeholders within the city, whether it be Public Works, Housing and Human Services, whatever. So we get all of their input and what they're doing from a mitigation standpoint, and that's the information that goes into this document. So the accountability piece comes from them, making sure that they're doing their mitigation practices and making sure the city follows through with what we're supposed to do here to mitigate those actions.
Okay, thanks very much. Just my questions go to the fact that the risk environment is changing and that reports like this are useful, but we also need to make sure we're actually carrying out the mitigation that the report suggests is necessary. So that goes to my question about what's the follow-up after this report.
Yeah, and I do know, I mean, as far as the ARPA money goes and all of that stuff, we do have money going into infrastructure, storm drains, you know, those types of things that do cause backups and flooding in those areas. So I do know that that part of that money from ARPA does go there. We have a lot of grant money that goes into that. So that's where that information comes from in this plan. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the work.
All right, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your work in helping prepare this and explaining it to us. A lot of important information in here. I look forward to digging a little deeper into it than I've had a chance to yet. Just one thing popped out in the page 6. We're talking about health and medical facilities in the city, maybe somewhere else in the report, but we do have a couple of urgent care, Care First and PMA urgent care. I'm not seeing them listed here. I'm just thinking if, you know, God forbid something happened, some tanker turned over or whatever, those urgent care facilities would be a, you know, first resort. So I just want to make sure that those are recorded as amenities that we do have here in the city. Also, just a small thing, I think there's a reference to George Mason High School in here somewhere, which is now Meridian, just for the sake of making sure that the region knows what our high school name is. Let's make sure to update that to show Meridian. And the catalog of disaster events goes back to 2017, which is probably fine, but it does remind me that when Mr. Tarter and I were sworn in, we were sworn in by candlelight in the aftermath of the derecho in 2012. It's not uncommon for us to have some very significant weather disaster events here. Storms in the summer, snows in the winter, and I don't know, it just might be useful to track back a little further than only 4 years. It looks a little more benign than it really is. I mean, on average, probably 10 years I've been on council, there's probably been an event almost every year of some kind that has, warranted a response from you folks.
Yeah, and we went back, since 2011, there's been one or multiple incidents here in the city every year.
Yeah, right.
That we've responded to your point, but we've actually took this document from 2017, and we've added a lot more to it. So whatever we adopted, those hazard mitigation plans didn't really change much. This time around it did, based off the fact we have a lot more growth in the city, we have a lot more construction. So this plan is much more detailed than the 2017 plan, and it does have much more information in there. So we have upgraded it. To your point, we will continue to look for ways to upgrade it as we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
So I thought we did it by candlelight so long ago. Exactly. Well, listen, Dave, you have something else?
Oh, one more question. It was brought to mind by the candlelight issue. Of course, in the colonial period, they were also meeting in taverns, and so I'll leave that alone. But my question to you is, to what extent is the failure of the power grid, locally or otherwise, and what generators and other things, do we have adequate capacity?
Awesome. For the failure of the power grid, we are working directly with the Virginia Power with Dominion, and usually, the entire area is affected. We as a city, did some steps to be prepared in case of, for example, we just placed a grant to change the generator that it's at the community center. Right now we have a 2006 or 2007, not sure, a diesel generator, and our intention is to replace it with a natural gas generator, which is better for the environment and it's more economical, and it's a better one. The city hall has its own generator, and also we are make the recommendation, because it's this is our span of authority, make recommendation when new buildings are developed to, and with the fire marshal, of course, to be equipped with generators. Otherwise, we are at the mercy of the Virginia Dominion in case of a larger and regional disaster.
And also, we have done audits within our city facilities without power. As far as carrying on city services, obviously that's a big deal. So we have done audits. There are things that we have to fill some gaps, but we wouldn't be completely caught off guard if we lost all power, as far as maintaining city services and what we need to do to kind of get that back up and running quickly.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Just one
Quickly, yeah.
The financial capabilities summary was rated as moderate. As I'm looking at the explanation on 25, I just wanted to inquire, what's the rationale, again, for the moderate rating? The moderate rating implies that there's some improvements that can be made, so I'm just curious what those are. Didn't see that.
Can you tell me what page?
Page 25. If there's a need for additional funding to be invested somewhere, I think I'm just trying to understand if there's a recommendation or something we need to be concerned about.
So like my colleague mentioned, for this plan, we are Office of Emergency Management, but for this plan, we work with all departments. And when we start updating this plan, we send questions, punctual questions to all departments. So, those are like a specific, questions, that, we ask, for example, in this case, we ask the financial department to help us with the answer to those questions.
Got it.
So we'd have to get back with you with that.
Yeah, I have to, I take note of I took note of that
Okay.
question, and I'll get back with you, Councilwoman,
I'm
with
just
the
curious.
answer.
I was just curious, Mr. Shields, if there's something on that, that generates something we just need to take note of and manage as a risk.
And also,
Thanks for bringing it to our attention. I had not really noted that myself either, so I'm looking at it on page 25 right now. We'll get back with you on that.
All right. Unless there's anything else, we want to thank you both for your fine work. And we know being ready is really the key linchpin because we never know when disaster is going to strike. So thank you so much for your fine work. And we look forward to further conversations about these matters. We have a motion we're going to do, momentarily. Any member of the public wish to speak to this item? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Do we have a motion someone would like to make?
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve TR 23-07.
And do we have a second? We have a motion and a second? Debbie, did you make us have to do the second?
I did say second.
All right, well, you win. So let's, we've got a motion and a second. Let's go on with the vote then.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes,
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, council.
thank you. And, my agenda, or my, I guess it's agenda, had this on consent, so that's where I was confused. I think I had an earlier version.
I think
of
you
this.
just didn't, you had an earlier version.
Got it.
Sorry
Let's
about
go on to the consent agenda. Does anyone want to remove any item from the consent agenda? If not, do we want to go ahead and make a motion? Does anyone want to make a motion?
Move to adopt the consent agenda.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you, council.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to business not on the agenda. Any committee reports and the like? Anyone would like to make? Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This should make staff happy and probably my colleagues too. I just want to announce that we're going to defer the scheduled March 2nd meeting of the Economic Development Committee until a later date to be determined. Instead, excuse me, we'll celebrate the newest milestone in the city's economic expansion at the planned groundbreaking of Founders 2 on Wednesday, March 15th at 3:30 p.m. It's been a busy and productive past several months for folks on the EDC, Ms. Hardy, Ms. Hiscott, setting us up for more progress this spring and summer. We've got before council now, outdoor dining ordinance, T-zone reform, Pearson Square SE amendment. We heard tonight, and the Byron SE amendment was approved, of course, a couple of weeks ago, and hopefully a formal application will be coming to council soon from Quinn Homestretch for senior living medical office development. New business openings are expected in coming months at Founders Row, West End Plaza, Smoothie King, and Solace South. And of course, major construction proceeds apace at Broad Washington and at West Falls. So I want to thank again Ms. Hardy and Ms. Hiscott for serving with me on the EDC and look forward to discussing those and other issues with the full council in the coming months.
All right, thank you. Other comments, Ms. Hardy?
One thing related to the Broad Street Hawk crossings that we just approved. Mr. Shields, I think I noted in the staff report that summer 2023 is when it's scheduled to start. Is that right? After we've approved the
That's correct.
contract award. And I think it notes Oak, Fairfax, and then kind of the Buxton/Berry intersections. I think we've gotten, we actually had a pet accident, I want to say about 2 years ago at Fairfax, East Fairfax. And so I don't know if that's in scope to adjust, because coming out from the Merrill House, people make really fast right turns. And so if we can shorten that crosswalk and maybe extend the curb as part of this project. I don't know whether we've already done engineering and design or.
Yeah, this has been out to bid, and so what you're approving is the contract. So that's gone through this very lengthy design and VDOT review process, so we're not able to change scope at this point.
Do you know if the scope includes improving that intersection?
It would not, no, not at Fairfax.
Okay. Even though it says Fairfax is a place where we'd get.
I'm sorry.
Because I think it was Oak, Fairfax, and Buxton/Berry is where
Yeah.
the three signals were.
So changing the geometry of that, how the street comes in, let me check.
It essentially operates like a really fast slip lane right now. Like if you come
Right,
out from
yeah,
Narrow House, you do a
exactly.
really fast right turn onto East Broad. And I think that's where the pet accident had happened about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And so if, as part of the Hawk signal work, we could shorten the ped crossing, which I think is a best practice because it's really wide intersection right now.
Yeah, I will, let me get back with you on the exact plans there.
And then one committee thing on GovOps. I had sent an email to all of council, but I want to remind you that we had committed to our employees to do mid-year performance check-ins. And so if everybody can get feedback to GovOps, just informal bullet points by the end of this week, GovOps would be happy to share that feedback with our employees at our March GovOps meeting. Thank you in
All right.
advance.
Other comments? Anything else from anyone? Okay, I think we're ready to adjourn unless anyone disagrees. We're ready to do it? All right, we're adjourned. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
I didn't catch what
Hi, Debbie.
what the subject of that letter was you read at the outset with having so many signatures.
Oh, no, that was just all the comments we